First up, can you please welcome our moderator, Gil Penchina. Hey, my man. Thank you for coming. Long flights?
Long flight from San Francisco.
Is your mic on? Say something.
I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I can hear it now.
How low is his voice? That's epic.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
And the jokes start early. Excellent.
Thank you for coming. What is this panel going to be about? Why should people stay?
We're going to be talking about what's cool in crypto, and we have a panel of three incredible entrepreneurs who have all been working in the industry for years.
Excellent. Well, Gil, the stage is yours.
All right, let's bring them on.
Welcome our panelists.
So we'll do a quick round of introductions. Amanda, if you'd like to start.
Sure. My name is Amanda Gutterman, and I am Chief Marketing Officer at Consensus. I'm also a co-creator of Ethereal, which is one of the most popular blockchain event series.
Hi, and I'm Jim Jorgensen. I'm a co-founder of Consumer Coin. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, I hope.
Excellent. Hey, I'm Paul. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Blockstate, and we're building market infrastructure based on blockchain technology.
So I'll start with sort of the obvious question for those of you who are interested in crypto, which is, it's been a really rough year for crypto. What are your opinions about sort of the industry going forward?
Sure, I'll start. So Consensus is focused on building blockchain tools of all sorts. Cryptocurrency is just one application of blockchain. We've found that as the price of crypto, we focus on Ethereum, as the price goes up, we find new waves of interest from investors and developers coming into the space, which we're really excited about and which was amazing in 2017. But even when the price goes down, we don't see those developers stopping. So 2017 was a huge year for us in terms of ecosystem growth, and that doesn't go away in price fluctuations. And the metric that we care about, even more than price, is the size of the ecosystem in terms of the number of developers who are actually building on the platform. And in terms of that metric, we're super enthused and as encouraged as ever about Ethereum.
I liked it.
Is that good?
Yeah, I should pass.
Do you feel better?
No, I'm just going to play on my history. So basically, I met Gil prior to 1999, and so crashes are part of the DNA of any massive technology. So, you gave the details behind it, which was great. But if you look at who dominates the internet today and when they started, Gil was at eBay. Did they mention you were at eBay?
No, it's okay.
Yeah. You said, okay, you don't want to talk about it? So, Gil, yeah, so basically some of them survived. Some of them that are broader, do better than some that are narrow, but it'll go up and down, and it's likely to go up and down. Crypto's already come up and down 3 massive times.
I think there's been, 3, 80, 90% drops in the last 5 years, so this
and
is
now
nothing
it's
new.
a back-to-school sale.
Yeah, and always depends on the time perspective, I guess. If you look at it 12 months ago, it's not so bad where we're standing right now. If you look at it 6 months ago, yes, it's a bit frustrating. But I think one thing which needs to be highlighted is that this has nothing to do with the underlying technology. So it's completely independent of the price of the asset. And as you were saying, yes, if the price goes up, interest increases. At the same time, I think there are more people in for running the marathon than just taking a short sprint right now. So it also has a good effect somehow to clean up a bit of projects which are not worthwhile for the next 10 years.
And the next time it goes up, we'll get another influx.
Well, Amanda convinced me last night, so I was out buying Bitcoin and Ether at my hotel late last night.
Oh, you're the reason it went up.
We'll see how
I do not give investment advice.
Now, talk about what's cool from an enterprise perspective, because there's lots of sort of big companies here in Europe now, and as well as around the world that are starting to work on crypto. What do you each see from an enterprise standpoint?
I think that enterprises are going to start wanting to hold digital assets and are going to look at digitizing their assets. And in order to do that, they're going to need really robust enterprise-grade custody solutions. So you see a lot of players in the market racing to build a great custody solution. We're doing it too. And it'll be exciting to see who's able to grab market share.
Funny enough, I think we have one here too.
Yeah,
Why don't you tell them a
exactly.
bit
So
about what you do?
I talked to quite a lot of banks, and for them it's key to have a very explicit regulation around these assets. I think this is still something missing, and I hope this will change in the upcoming months. Especially on a European level, it would be great to have a harmonized regulation. But we see a lot of interest in using the technology for already existing products. For example, we're building a bond which is completely on-chain based without the need of traditional market infrastructure. And this is also independent of crypto assets. So I think we'll probably take a bit of more time, but we see more and more interest.
And so for you, your enterprise customers would be banks then, or?
Yeah, asset managers and banks, yeah.
Got it.
I think almost any of the major companies is involved, technology companies. So I don't know if any of you went to Dreamforce and took the midnight flyer here, but you know, they made their announcement, their blockchain announcement with I think it was IBM and Marsh and Insurance for proof of insurance. They're building in Salesforce the whole system on a blockchain, but they're also building. I don't know if anyone works at Salesforce, but they have their 4 tenets. The first one is trust, and anytime your industry's first thing is trust, you've got to be into the blockchain, and they are. So if you want to kind of see what's going to be behind the system, you can see what they've done with Marriott Hotels and Siri, and you know, Marriott's whole system is built on Salesforce software, and there's got to be a trust system when you're telling Siri that you need more ice, or you need another bottle of champagne. That information's not suddenly showing up in the internet, at the wrong time. So they have a very large group of engineers there at Salesforce. And so when you talk about how are things going forward, the price of the Bitcoin has nothing to do with how many engineers Salesforce has got applying to the technology. And as these guys build out the technology, they're building it out in a massively effective way. And the things, just like with the internet, companies build things internally, and then as these employees kind of go to the startups, that technology spreads. So it's not only the money raised, by the crypto companies, okay, it's also the money being put in by these major corporations.
And it's also relevant in terms of unrelated to cryptocurrency, that a lot of the enterprise use cases you see are on private implementation, so they're actually not touching cryptocurrency at all. We're starting to see some enterprises wading into open source and getting out into exploring public blockchains, but we're also seeing people building on private Ethereum, private all kinds of chains.
Give an example of why you would want a private blockchain.
So decentralization, exposure to the public chain is relevant if you want to have a bunch of actors on a system that aren't going to trust each other. And so if you're just trying to build a system that exists within the context of one entity, everyone trusts each other. So you actually don't need to have it be open and decentralized because it's a trusted system inside of itself. And that way you can have it be even more efficient by having everyone, let's say in an organization, able to use the same document authentication system, let's say, that's just internal. So you can have a private implementation of Ethereum or another blockchain. On Ethereum, you can also have a public blockchain, and you can have all kinds of different consortium chains in between. And I imagine that we're going to head toward a world where there are going to be public chains, there are going to be private chains, there are going to be consortium chains, and everything will be able to move fluidly between those different layers of decentralization and of authentication.
Okay. You had an interesting example of how swaps are risky, and blockchain could sort of solve that. Do you want to spend a minute on that?
Yeah, I think, this is one of the great advantages of blockchain, that you don't need to put trust into an organization, which is needed like a bank. But for example, the bond we talked about, so if two parties meet, there's no need to know the other one, because through a smart contract, you can take care of the whole collateral management, so the exchange of two assets can function without needing to put trust into the two actors. So I think this is huge advantage. Yeah.
And on the Swiss or German stock exchange, how long would it normally take for this exchange to happen?
So I think it really depends on the products. For some, I think right now blockchain technology is not even the best use case. So if we talk about very liquid derivatives, I don't see any advantage of settling them currently on-chain. But for illiquid derivatives, also for transactions which don't need to happen in a couple of seconds, which today might take even a week, there are tons of very interesting use cases. It's also the feedback we're getting. And I think one very interesting thing is also to see that when we talk to banks, they have their proprietary legacy infrastructure, and they have been building on it for the early 80s, and they invest 80 to 90% in just maintaining this. And integrating new technology is always very costly. But we can create a completely independent system on-chain running parallel to it. They can look at it, see how well it works, and then implementing it and connecting what you're saying to the existing infrastructure. So I think the openness to trying out new infrastructure modules is much easier with blockchain technology, since it doesn't require to be connected from the first day on.
Got it. That's helpful. I mean, for me, at least when I trade, it's 3 days to settle in the US, at least a similar amount in the UK. So the idea of sort of same second settlement made a lot of sense to me. So let's switch to sort of more consumer-friendly things. Like, there are a lot of people here in the audience who are entrepreneurs or starting to get interested in crypto. What would you tell them is sort of the cool new thing to get excited about or to look into if you're a consumer trying to get involved in this?
What I personally find very interesting is legal setups which are being created. Malta, for example, is pretty forward thinking in this regard. So they're creating self-sovereign entities. I mean, it's still very early, but they can basically own assets. So it's a piece of code potentially which could, in a couple of years, buy an autonomous car, exchange on-chain for its services, and it's completely independent from a legal person. So I think we'll see a lot of very innovative ways of how to structure these entities, and this will severely impact our economy when we have this new legal type running on-chain. Yeah.
And when you say entities, you really mean buying assets using a coin?
Yeah, it's really a legal structure. So it's not a limited, which is owned by directors or another legal entity. So they're very early on creating something which can be really self-sovereign, owned by a piece of code. So it doesn't need to be owned by an actual person anymore. And then you ask yourself, okay, what happens if this code is malicious, or there was a bug, what can I do about it? This pretty early greenfield, but I think if you just think about the future, what impact this might have if you have just parts of code probably owning real estate, cars, transacting with each other. I think we'll see this rather sooner than later.
So code-based voting or control by the coin holders is what you think is interesting?
Not only this, but it's completely self-sovereign, this part of code. Right. So nobody can, in the end, once it's deployed, it runs on its own. And I mean, you could create this now from a technological point, but there's no legal structure which enables this piece of code actually to buy assets, transact, and being its own legal person. And so I think this is very early on, but this I find quite exciting.
It's a little early for me, but it's good. So with like a consumer coin, basically we're just using the blockchain to combine the buying power of a group of people, and you use the smart contracts pretty much the way you're saying, with a legal structure, but using the voting power and the transparency that you get with the blockchain. And that way you can take a massive amount of buying power to a particular company, and you get the group results. I mean, if anybody here works for Volkswagen, they know they get these huge discounts why don't you and I get the same discounts? Because as a group, we're bigger than Volkswagen. So that's one of the things you can do with your voting and transparent system.
And so if I get a consumer coin, how do I use it?
Just as a payment system, it's a payment token. So you can take it to Deutsche Telekom and pay your bill at a discount.
And so I get a discount just for using the token
Just
and
for
being an
using
early
it,
adopter.
because you're automatically part of the group.
Got it. Interesting.
I could talk your ear off about cool blockchain projects, so I will.
Excellent.
So on the legal front, which I also think is super cool, how many people are constantly going to their lawyers for another MNDA? I am. We've already implemented something called Open Law, which is basically Mad Libs for legal contracts, where you just enter the terms that you need, and it spits out a contract that actually automatically executes using smart contracts on Ethereum. So we use that for our contracts now internally when they can be made pretty formulaically. And we think that's going to cut out a lot of unnecessary or more formulaic type legal work. So people are going to be executing and writing contracts using smart contracts, which we think is super cool. Open Law actually just partnered with Rocket Lawyer, which is going to really accelerate their being able to deliver this to a lot more folks. Other things on the consumer front, you mentioned real estate. We have a great project called Meridio, which is fractionalizing and tokenizing ownership of commercial real estate projects. So usually your average investor can't really get in on commercial real estate because the premium's too high, and this allows more people to enter those markets. Also, they're much more kind of tactile, kind of consumer-facing products like music, like journalism. There's a great project called Civil, which is basically creating an entire media ecosystem on the blockchain. A great project called Ujo, UJO, that's allowing consumers to download music directly from artists on the blockchain. So I think we're going to see all kinds of different applications that people can use now. I think we're going to see a lot more games. I don't think CryptoKitties will be alone.
How is CryptoKitties doing? It seems like it slowed down a bit.
I mean, I think, how is Pokemon Go doing? Like, there'll be lots of moments, there'll be lots more games, lots more fads. The two trends in technology adoption, and you look at this with every new technology, are games and porn, and probably those two things are going to turn no-coiners into coiners and are going to accelerate adoption of this platform like many others.
You mentioned Good Money earlier. Do you want to talk a minute about them as well?
Yeah, they're an interesting project. They're an emerging project in the blockchain space. They are looking at creating kind of a millennial bank on the blockchain. I think they're going to have really great UX. I think they're going to be able to reach a lot of folks that haven't felt well served by traditional banking and that want to do banking on their phones and that want to interact with crypto, but that also want to support good causes.
So if you think about sort of this massive explosion of new sort of crypto projects in the last year or two, tell me about a couple of them that each of you find sort of personally interesting and why.
I think one really good example is Gutcoin, actually something you co-created.
We love Gitcoin.
We're using Gitcoin. What's Gitcoin? Gitcoin can be used to create incentives for programmers to build and deploy code for other ecosystems. We're using this for DIA. So we can basically scale our internal IT very fast by using this infrastructure, and I think it's a great advantage for the companies who are very flexible in the resources they are needing, but also the people who work on these projects are scattered all across the world. So it's a very strong community you're bringing together, and was basically the foundation for how we scaled our platform very fast. So very excited.
I'm so happy to
about
hear
this.
that. It's so great to have examples of people using tools for their businesses and actually benefiting from them.
And I think this is very, very unique to the whole space. When we thought, okay, how do we do this? The bounty management, should we build this? And then you look around, we connected with the guys and said, hey, I think we could fork your solution a bit for our purposes. They said, okay, great, let's do that. So you don't need to build everything from scratch, which is important because we're so early. We need to create a lot of infrastructure to actually have working products which are also consumer-facing. And this collaboration in the space is really helping and accelerating everything.
And this is more than bug bounties then? This is actual application development, or like where does it end?
It could be everything. I think the underlying concept is just you create a ticket, you say, I need this and that, and I'm willing to pay a certain amount for it, and people are willing to take over the task, are building this, and they're being paid in mostly Ether, but I think they're also very open to also integrating other currencies, which again I think shows how open the system is. It's not it just only works with Ether or certain currencies. It's open to also other use cases, and yeah, it's Upwork for coding in the blockchain space. Maybe I hope I don't give a very wrong pitch for the guys now, but
No, that's perfect.
okay.
You're advertising our product. I love it.
Glad to.
Do you want to make a payment now? Get your
An affiliate
Ethereum.
deal.
Yeah.
We can
How
set
many
it up in
Ethereum are
a
you
smart
gonna get through that?
contract. A smart
A
contract for
lot, we
affiliate
agreed.
marketing.
You don't need a trusted intermediary anymore. You guys can make this without me. So we use the Raiden network. Again, it's for almost the same reason. So, and you were saying earlier, all this stuff is being built. Some of it open, some of it private, but it slowly gets into everybody's system. And just like in prior technologies, you build off other people's stuff. And you're not so when you're starting a company, you're not starting from scratch. You're not coding hardly anything. You're building off this, and then the RAID network is basically to try to lower the costs of all the Ethereum transactions. So, so it turned out to be that was the way we could do our instant transactions, a little bit like Ripple. And so, that is built on Ethereum, but it's the same basic kind of concept of lowering the cost of doing any of our transactions.
Yeah, I just love how collaborative this community is. Like we all use each other's bits and pieces, and we tend to find in this whole ecosystem that the rising tide lifts all boats. So even if it's another company that's introducing a newcomer to blockchain or introducing a new group of people to an application, wow, that's amazing because they've gotten a group of people to get wallets. And once you have a wallet, once you have an identity, then you're going to do all kinds of other stuff. So it's amazing to see whether it's in our ecosystem as Consensus or whether it's outside of Consensus. It's just so exciting to see folks starting to get consumers into the game, because once they're in, they're going to touch everything. In terms of other projects I'm excited about, and this one's outside of Consensus, is Loom/Zombie Chain. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they're doing a great job at layer 2 on top of Ethereum. Some people call 2017 the year of Ethereum scalability, because that's something that really needs to happen, and that's a big priority. So what they have is a layer 2. They're using Ethereum as a layer 1. And the idea is that if you're playing a game, you don't want to have every single thing you do have to resolve out to the Ethereum blockchain. So you want to be playing your game, and then when you're done playing, then everything that you did during your game resolves out to the Ethereum. Let's say if you have in-game assets, let's say you sold this, you bought that, or let's say you have a reward for something. So you can actually play a game pretty quickly and not get slowed down. And that's really exciting because, as I said before, I think one of the use cases that's going to get consumers into blockchain is games. So I'm super psyched to see anything that people are building that's gonna get people playing games.
I'm sort of surprised that no one actually mentioned Ethereum as sort of their favorite, because you think about this whole notion of smart contracts that are
I think of Ethereum as
anywhere.
blockchain.
Yeah, fair enough. The notion of smart contracts, the notion that they're out there running on their own, transparently available for everyone to audit, is a pretty magical idea that's only 3-4 years old now.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Ethereum basically as blockchain. I think most people, when they say blockchain, actually mean Ethereum. Bitcoin, super interesting. The inspiration for Ethereum obviously came out of Bitcoin, but if you think about it, Ethereum is kind of like an app store, whereas Bitcoin's kind of like an app. Ethereum's kind of like the internet, whereas Bitcoin's kind of like email. And email's super important, it has a place. But Ethereum really gives people the ability to build whatever they want and have that automatically execute. So a huge proportion of the different projects that we've been talking about are on the Ethereum platform.
Yep. So you mentioned the granddaddy, Bitcoin, which is almost 10 years old now. And it's kind of amazing that it's a project that we don't know who started, running essentially on its own, and 10 years later has never been hacked, never been sort of broken into. It still seems to work amazingly well. You know, if you sort of think about a 10-year-old technology, if I think of the internet 10 years in, that would be what, the mid to late 90s? Where are we in blockchain relative to, the internet relative to timescales? Like, is this 1998 for the internet? Is this 2005 for the internet? Like, where do you think we are in terms of, the development of blockchain?
I think probably we're really in the late 80s, early 90s, but time is moving
Late
much
80s.
faster. So
Okay.
I think we discussed this before. Everything blockchain ecosystem relevant. I think you have like 2x, 3x the speed on development, and I think we're now on the verge of seeing a lot of products which will have a huge influence on the let's say off-chain world and impact industries. So I think we're very early, but we're moving much faster, and we'll see much more relevance for the underlying technology than we saw with the internet. It just took a bit longer, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think things move faster, so it's hard to pinpoint an exact year, like the 90s or the 80s. But yeah, I guess it depends what metric you care about. If
Yep.
your metric is consumer adoption, that's one way of thinking about it. I don't think we're ever going to have every human knowing that they're interacting with a blockchain-based system. Ideally, we're able to come up with good enough UX that people don't have to know that they're dealing with a blockchain-based system, and I don't think real user adoption is going to happen until we figure that out. In terms of institutional acceptance, I think we're well on our way. In terms of, maturity of the technology, I think we have a lot to build, especially on the Ethereum roadmap. Ethereum's a lot younger than Bitcoin and needs to, still solve a lot of problems, which is a lot of opportunity ahead. So I would agree, maybe somewhere around there, but it's all moving fast.
Yeah, it's moving fast, and I think another way, maybe a metric to look at, would be when you start seeing that first Amazon, that first broad-scale consumer-based thing. You'll be able to say, now I know about where we are compared to the internet, but we're not there yet. So there's not this, you don't see this kernel of that thing quite there. It may be being developed, it's not quite visible. It may actually even exist now, but it's so early you didn't see it. But once you had that kind of companies that existed, the eBays and where they got what you said, the non-users to become users, that first thing. And yes, people were chipping at it, but then there's somebody who was broad enough to actually bring everybody in. And whether they know they're in or not is true.
I hope that the thing that's able to permeate is identity, because I think right now there's a data war going on,
Yep.
and companies are trying to amass all the data in the world in one place where it's owned by them. And I think if we're going to represent all of the data in the world in one place, if we're going to create a modular model of reality, which I think is inevitable, then in what context are we comfortable doing that? And I think on the blockchain, you can have individuals actually owning their own data, monetizing their own data on their own behalf. And I think folks are increasingly going to insist on that. So I really hope that's one of the applications that's able to permeate the consumer base.
I think that's a great prediction to leave the audience with. So thank you all very much. It was great having you here.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
you.